What if the very thing that broke you was never a punishment? What if it was a door? Somewhere tonight there is a person reading these words with a heart so tired, so bruised, so confused by everything that has fallen apart, that they have quietly started to believe God forgot their address. They have started to whisper the most dangerous lie a human being can believe. Maybe I'm not part of the plan anymore. Maybe you prayed and heard nothing back. Maybe you worked and sacrificed and stayed faithful and still watched the door slam shut in your face. Maybe someone you loved walked away without even looking back, and it left a hole in your chest that nothing seems to fill. And somewhere in that silence, you started asking the question every wounded soul eventually asks: does God even see me? Stay with me for the next few minutes, because I am not here to give you empty comfort. I am here to show you something that will change the way you see every closed door, every unanswered prayer, every person who left, every dream that seemed to die. Because I promise you, by the end of this, you will understand that the very things that felt like abandonment were actually the fingerprints of a plan too magnificent for you to see yet. Let's start with the truth most people never want to hear, because it stings before it heals. You were never promised a life free of storms. Nobody who ever did anything remarkable was handed a smooth road and told to walk it in comfort. Look back far enough into any story that inspires you, and you will find wreckage before the miracle. You will find rejection before the rise. You will find silence before the breakthrough. That is not an accident. That is the pattern. That is how a plan bigger than your understanding usually unfolds. In the dark, in the waiting, in the places where nothing seems to be happening, even though everything is being prepared. Think about the moments in your own life when everything fell apart and you thought it was the end. The job that lets you go. The relationship ended in tears. The dream that collapsed right in front of you, leaving you standing in the rubble, asking why. At the time, it felt like punishment. It felt like proof that you weren't good enough, smart enough, chosen enough. But look at where you are standing right now. Look at what you know now that you didn't know then. Look at who you have become because of what broke you. That heartbreak taught you something comfort never could have taught you. That failure built a strength inside you that success never would have built. You didn't see it in the moment, but you were being shaped. Quietly, painfully, purposefully. There's a truth that runs through every ancient story of struggle and triumph. Sometimes the greatest blessings arrive disguised as devastating losses. Sometimes the empty hands you're staring at right now are not empty because you failed. They're empty because they're about to be filled with something greater than what you were originally holding. Think about it. If your hands are still full of old things, how can they ever receive the new thing? Every closed door, every ended relationship, every dream that quietly died, it wasn't there to destroy you. It was there to make room for something you couldn't have imagined asking for because you didn't even know it existed yet. I need you to hear this clearly. The people who walked out of your life were not a mistake. Some of them were never meant to walk the whole road with you. Some of them were only meant to walk you to a certain point, and once that point was reached, their part in your story was finished. It hurts. It hurts more than almost anything else in life, watching someone you loved, someone you trusted, someone you built plans with, disappear. But here is the secret nobody tells you in the middle of that pain. Sometimes the most loving thing that can happen to you is for the wrong person to leave, even if it feels like the cruelest thing in the world while it's happening. There were conversations you had never heard of. There were decisions made behind closed doors that you were never shown. There were things being protected in you that you couldn't protect yourself. And so that door closed, not to leave you stranded, but to keep you from walking into something that would have cost you far more than the pain you're feeling right now. Stop for a second and think about every time in your life when everything seems to be working against you. The rejection letters, the doors that didn't open, The people who doubted you dismissed you, underestimated you. At the time, each one felt like proof that you weren't enough. But what if I told you that every single one of those moments was actually prepared? What if the no you received wasn't a wall, but a redirection? What if the failure wasn't there to end your story, but to write a better chapter than the one you were trying to force? There is a difference between a door that's locked forever and a door that's locked for now, because something better is being built behind it. You don't always get to see the difference in the moment, but time reveals it. Time always reveals it. Here's something worth sitting with. You were not brought this far to be abandoned now. Think about everything you have already survived. Think about the nights you didn't think you'd make it through, the losses that felt like they would break you permanently, the situations that seemed absolutely impossible to overcome. And yet, here you are, still breathing, still standing, still moving forward, even if it's slower than you'd like. That is not luck. That is not a coincidence. That is the evidence of something greater than circumstance working on your behalf, even in the moments you couldn't feel it. Whatever carried you through everything you've already survived is not going to abandon you now, in the middle of the very story it's been written all along. There's an old truth that says the deepest pain a person can carry is not the pain of loss, but the pain of feeling forgotten, of feeling invisible, of wondering if anyone, anything, any force in this universe even notices what you're going through. But you were never invisible. Every tear you cried in private was seen. Every prayer whispered into the dark. Every quiet plea for things to just get a little easier. Every moment you sat alone wondering if you were wasting your life chasing something that would never come. None of it went unnoticed. You were being watched over even in silence. Especially in silence. Let's talk about waiting, because if there is one thing that breaks people faster than heartbreak, it's waiting. Waiting for the answer that doesn't come. Waiting for the healing that takes longer than you expected. Waiting for the door to open when you've already knocked 1,000 times. Waiting is one of the most painful disciplines a human being can go through, because waiting requires something we are not naturally good at: trust. We want control. We want certainty. We want to know exactly how the story ends before we agree to keep living it. But that's not how meaningful stories work. If you knew every twist, every turn, every outcome in advance, it wouldn't require faith. It would just require patience with a guaranteed reward. But real trust, the kind that transforms you, only grows in uncertainty. Only grows in the waiting room, only grow when you don't know what's next, but you choose to keep moving forward anyway. Consider this: if you were shown the entire plan for your life today, every heartbreak, every setback, every triumph, every ending, and every beginning, it would overwhelm you. It would terrify you before it ever inspired you. There's a reason the picture unfolds one day at a time instead of all at once. You are not meant to carry the weight of your whole future today. You are only meant to carry it today. Just today. Tomorrow will bring its own strength when tomorrow arrives. That is not a flaw in the plan. That is mercy built into the plan. And here is something that should shake you awake if you've been sleepwalking through your pain, convinced that you're being punished, convinced that you're being left behind, convinced that everyone else's life is moving forward while yours stands still. Delay is not denial. Just because something hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it isn't going to happen. Just because the timing doesn't match what you expected doesn't mean the promise was broken. Some of the most beautiful outcomes in human history took far longer to unfold than anyone wanted. The wait itself was never the punishment. The wait was prepared. Think about a seed buried in the ground. From the surface, nothing looks like it's happening. No movement, no sign of life, just darkness and stillness and silence. But underground, in a place no one can see, roots are forming. Structure is being built. Strength is being developed and will one day be strong enough to hold up everything that grows from it. If that seed could feel, it might believe it was forgotten, buried, abandoned in the dark, but it isn't abandoned. It's being prepared for growth. It cannot yet be imagined. You are that seed right now. Whatever season you're in, the waiting, the silence, the uncertainty, it is not evidence that nothing is happening. It's evidence that something is happening beneath the surface where you can't see it yet, but where it matters most. I want you to think about every time you felt utterly alone in your struggle, convinced that nobody understands what you're carrying, convinced that if people really knew what you were going through, they would look at you differently, convinced that this particular pain, this specific heartbreak, failure, fear, is something no one else could possibly understand. But pain has a strange way of connecting us to something greater than ourselves, because suffering is universal. Every person who has walked on this earth has known moments of doubt, moments of despair, moments where they questioned whether they mattered at all. You are not alone in the ache. You are not alone in exhaustion. You are not the first person to feel like giving up, and you will not be the last person to find a reason to keep going. Here's something that will either comfort you or convict you, depending on where your heart is right now. The plan for your life was never designed around your comfort. It was designed for your growth, and growth, real growth, the kind that changes who you are at your core, almost never happens in comfortable seasons. It happens on fire. It happens at a loss. It happens in the moments you didn't choose and wouldn't have chosen if given the option. Nobody signs up voluntarily for heartbreak. Nobody raises their hand and asks for failure. Nobody prays for the version of their story that includes devastating loss. And yet, look back at your own life honestly. Isn't it true that your deepest strength, your sharpest wisdom, your most unshakable faith came out of your hardest seasons, not your easiest ones? There is something almost unbearable about watching your plans fall apart in real time. Watching the business fails, watching the relationship ends, watching the dream you built your identity around collapse right in front of your eyes. In those moments, it feels like destruction, pure and simple. But sometimes what looks like destruction from where you're standing is actually protection from where the plan is standing. Sometimes plans are allowed to fall apart specifically because those plans, had they succeeded, would have led you somewhere far more dangerous than the disappointment you're currently feeling. You don't get to see the road you didn't take. You only get to feel the pain of the road that is closed. But trust that the thing guiding your story sees both roads and chose to spare you from one of them. So where does that leave you tonight? Standing here, maybe still hurting, maybe still confused, maybe still waiting for an answer that hasn't come yet. It leaves you exactly where you're supposed to be, in the middle of a story that isn't finished, not abandoned, not forgotten, not punished, in the middle. And the middle is always the hardest part to endure because you can't see the ending from here. But every story worth telling has a middle that looked like the end before it became the beginning of something greater. Keep going, not because it's easy, not because you can see the finish line, but because the very fact that you are still here, still breathing, still fighting, still reading these words instead of giving up, is proof that your story is not over. It's proof that whatever brought you this far has no intention of leaving you now. And maybe, just maybe, the reason you feel this so deeply right now, the reason these words feel like they were written directly for you, is because they were meant to find you at exactly this moment. Not a moment sooner, not a moment later, right now when you need to hear it most. That is how this works. That is how it has always worked. The right words arrive at the right time, the same way the right doors open at the right time, and the right people show up at the right time. You didn't stumble onto this by accident. You were led here. So let this be the moment you stop measuring your worth by what has fallen apart and start measuring your future by what is still being built inside you, quietly, patiently, purposefully, one day at a time.